was in the middle of a quarterly review when my phone buzzed across the conference table. I didn't recognize the number. Houston area code, but not one I had saved. I let it go to voicemail. We were 40 minutes into a 3-hour meeting and my COO was mid-sentence about port logistics in Galveston. I had 32 people waiting on decisions that week. It buzzed again. Same number. I picked it up and walked out without saying a word. Is this Mr. Caldwell? Father of Zach Caldwell. I stopped walking. This is Dr. Amara Singh at Memorial Hermann. Your son was brought in about 20 minutes ago. He's stable, but I need you here. Now. I don't remember the elevator. I don't remember telling my assistant to cancel everything. I remember the parking garage, the smell of exhaust, and my hands not working right when I tried to get the keys into the ignition. Zach was 19. He was a sophomore at Rice University on a partial academic scholarship. He was studying mechanical engineering because he wanted to build things that mattered. He called me every Sunday without fail, even when I forgot to call him first. He was the kind of kid who still said yes sir and no sir and meant it. His mother and I divorced when he was 11. She remarried, moved to Scottsdale. Zach chose to stay in Texas with me, and I spent the better part of a decade trying to be worth that choice. I made it to Memorial Hermann in 18 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock when I parked, and I've thought about those 18 minutes every day since. A nurse met me at the trauma bay entrance. She had that look, the careful one, the one trained not to show you too much too fast. She brought me to a small room first, not to Zach, and that's when I knew it was bad. They only take you to the small room when they need to manage what your face is going to do. Dr. Singh came in, mid-40s, calm, the kind of calm that only comes from years of delivering impossible news. Your son has a fractured orbital socket, 2 broken ribs, a laceration along his jaw that required 14 stitches, and a moderate concussion. He was found unresponsive in the parking lot outside a private residence in River Oaks at approximately 11:40 last night. I heard all of it. I heard none of it. He was conscious when the ambulance arrived. He told paramedics he didn't fall. He told them he was beaten. I sat with that for a second. Can I see him? Zach looked smaller in the hospital bed than I had ever seen him. He had my build, 6'1", broad through the shoulders, a kid who played 2 years of high school football before he decided he'd rather build robots. The left side of his face was swollen dark purple. There was a bandage along his jaw. He had an IV in his right arm and a monitor clipped to his finger. He looked at me when I walked in and tried to say something, and I just held up my hand. I sat down next to the bed and I put my hand on top of his, and I didn't say anything for a long time. Dad, he finally said, I'm here. I didn't start it. I know. I want you to know I didn't start it. Zach, I know. He closed his eyes. The monitor beeped. I sat there until a detective came in. His name was Fowler, HPD, and he had the energy of a man going through motions he'd already decided the outcome of. He asked Zach a few questions, wrote things down, asked about the party. It had been a private gathering at a home in River Oaks, one of the oldest, wealthiest neighborhoods in Houston. The house belonged to the Hartley family. Specifically, to Senator Warren Hartley, 2-term U.S. Senator from Texas, ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, man whose face appeared on billboards across the state during every election cycle with the words, family. Strength. Texas. His son was Beckett Hartley, 22, a senior at SMU who drove a Porsche Cayenne and had never in his life experienced a consequence. Zach had gone to the party with a friend from his dorm. He didn't know whose house it was. He didn't know Beckett Hartley from anyone. He'd been there for maybe an hour when he heard a girl crying in a back room. He went to check. He opened a door he shouldn't have opened. He saw something he shouldn't have seen. He pulled out his phone to call someone. He didn't even know who. 911, campus security, anyone. And that's when Beckett and 2 of his friends walked out and saw him standing there with his phone up. They followed him outside. There were 3 of them and 1 of him. And they had the advantage of knowing exactly what they were protecting. Detective Fowler wrote it all down. He nodded in the right places. He said, "We'll look into it more times than I could count." He shook my hand at the door with the grip of a man who had already made a phone call before he walked into this room. And I knew in the specific way that comes from 22 years of reading people across negotiating tables that nothing was going to happen. I was right. I spent 3 days at that hospital. I slept in the chair next to Zach's bed the first night. I brought his laptop on the second day because he was going stir-crazy and his professors had already emailed to say, take all the time he needed, which was kind. But Zach wasn't the kind of kid who liked being still. On the fourth day, I drove to the HPD district office and sat down with Fowler and his sergeant. A man named Briscoe, broad, red-faced, the kind of guy who'd been in the same chair for 15 years and had no plans to leave it. Mr. Burst Caldwell, Briscoe said, "We take assaults very seriously." "I know you do," I said. "So what's the status?" A pause. That pause. "The individuals involved have legal representation. We're coordinating with the DA's office on how to proceed." "What does that mean?" "It means we're being thorough." I looked at him. He didn't look away, which takes a certain kind of practiced dishonesty to pull off. "Briscoe," I said, "we both know whose son this is." He didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it. He said, "The process takes time," and stood up, which meant the meeting was over. I drove home. I sat in my kitchen for a long time. My house is a 5-bedroom and memorial 1,200 square feet more than 2 people ever needed, and that night it felt like a box. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon and didn't drink it. I looked at the photos on the refrigerator. Zach at 8 years old on a fishing trip in the hill country. Zach at 16 at his first robotics competition. Zach grinning at his rice orientation with that specific grin he had where one side went up higher than the other. I thought about what I was. Before the logistics company. Before the house and memorial and the quarterly reviews and the CLO and the 32 people waiting on decisions. Before all of that, I spent 8 years as a Special Forces warrant officer. 18 Delta Special Forces medical surgeon, cross-trained in intelligence. I did 2 tours in Afghanistan, one in Iraq, one in a country whose name I am not going to put in the story. I was good at what I did in the way that men who've done it for a long time and come home get good at it. Quietly, thoroughly, without any particular pride about the specifics. I got out at 31. I built a company. I bought a house. I tried to become a different kind of man. I sat in my kitchen and I understood, in a way that settled very calmly into my chest, that I had not entirely succeeded. I didn't make any decision that night. I want to be clear about that. What I did was start paying attention. I hired a private investigator named Hendricks, a retired Harris County deputy I'd used twice before for due diligence on acquisitions. I told him I needed everything on Beckett Hartley and the 2 individuals who had been with him that night. I told him I needed it clean and I needed it fast. What came back over the next 2 weeks was not surprising. It was clarifying. Beckett Hartley had 2 prior incidents that had been resolved quietly. One in 2021 involving a DWI that was pleaded down to a traffic violation. One in 2022 involving a complaint filed by a University of Texas student that was withdrawn 6 weeks later after, according to Hendrick's source, a financial arrangement. The other 2 men were Wade Prescott, 23, son of a federal appellate judge in the 5th Circuit, and a third named Colt Drennan, 24, whose father ran the largest private equity fund in Dallas. 3 young men who had grown up understanding, at a cellular level, that the rules were a system designed for other people. The DA's office declined to file charges. The official statement cited insufficient evidence to meet the burden of proof at trial. They released it on a Friday afternoon, the specific timing used by institutions that want a statement to be technically public and functionally invisible. I found out from Zach's phone call. He was back in his dorm by then, cleared for light activity, jaw still sore when he chewed. He called me on a Thursday evening and read me the statement from the DA's website and then was quiet for a moment. "Dad," he said, "what do we do?" "Nothing yet," I said. "Let me think." "Dad, Zach, let me think." "Dad, Zach, I need you to go to class. I need you to eat dinner. I need you to call me Sunday like you always do. Can you do that?" A pause. "Yeah, good." I hung up and I went to my garage. I have a biometric safe bolted to the concrete floor behind a shelving unit. I have not opened it in 4 years. Inside it there is documentation, equipment, and one item I will not describe in detail except to say it was issued to me in 2009, and I qualified expert with it annually for 6 years, and I have never once in my civilian life believed I would need it again. I looked at what was in the safe for a long time, then I closed it. What I did instead was smarter. Not because I am a particularly smart man, but because I am a trained one, and training teaches you that the first action you take sets all subsequent actions. You do not move until you know the terrain. I spent 3 weeks building a picture. I used skills I had not formally used in over a decade. I mapped Beckett Hartley's routine, where he went, when, with whom. River Oaks Athletic Club on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, a bar in Midtown on Friday nights, his father's house every other Sunday for dinner. I identified his security, personal security, Senator Hartley's detail, the private security at the family compound. I identified the gaps. I identified Wade Prescott's routine, his father's courthouse schedule, the gap between when the judge's security detail started and when Wade left his apartment in Montrose. I identified Colt Drennan's routine. He was actually the easiest. He was 24, had never held a job, and spent most of his time at a lease house his father owned near Lake Conroe. I want to be honest about what I was doing. I was preparing options. Some options I would use, some I would not. I told myself every morning that I was gathering information. Some mornings I believed that. What changed was Hendricks. He called me on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after Zach came home from the hospital. His voice was different, tighter. "Caldwell, I need to tell you something and you're not going to like it. Go ahead." The girl. From that night at the Hartley house, I waited. Her name is Priya Anand. She's a junior at Rice. She filed a report with Campus Title IX the week after. Someone from the DA's office called Rice's general counsel. The Title IX process was suspended pending the criminal investigation. The criminal investigation was declined. The Title IX process has not been reinitiated. He paused. She's been asked, twice, by people she cannot identify, to reconsider whether she wants to pursue this further. I sat very still. She has a lawyer now, Hendricks said. A good one. But Caldwell, she's scared. She's genuinely scared? I hung up. I went and sat in my backyard for a while. My neighbor's dog was barking at something down the fence line. A mockingbird was going through its full catalog in the oak tree by the gate. It was a Tuesday morning in Houston, and the sun was doing what the sun does in Houston in October, which is shine too hard and too bright on everything equally, with no particular interest in what it's illuminating. I thought about Priya Anand, a junior at Rice who had done nothing wrong, who had been in the wrong room at the wrong time, who was now being managed by people who controlled the mechanisms she would normally turn to for help. I thought about the judge in the Fifth Circuit, the private equity fund in Dallas, the senior senator from Texas on the Judiciary Committee. I thought about what men with those resources would do to a 20-year-old woman they wanted to stay quiet. I went back to the garage. I won't detail everything that followed, not because I'm protecting myself, I'm past that, but because some of it is not mine to narrate. What I can tell you is that it took 41 days. I can tell you that I did not rush. I had learned, a long time ago, that the men who make the most noise and the fastest moves are the men who are acting on emotion, and emotion is the enemy of precision. Colt Drennan was first. He had developed what Hendricks charitably called a recreational habit that his father's money had kept manageable. I had documentation, financial records, text chains, photos, that his father's lawyers would not be able to make go away without making everything significantly worse. I delivered it anonymously to a journalist at the Houston Chronicle I had spoken to, once, off the record, 3 weeks prior. I told her exactly what she was looking at. The story ran on a Thursday. Colt Drennan's father pulled his son out of Houston by the following Monday. Colt was sent to a facility in Colorado. He has not returned. Wade Prescott's father, Judge Prescott, was more difficult. Federal judges have significant insulation, but federal judges who have been quietly shaping prosecutorial decisions in their district for personal reasons have a different kind of exposure. Hendricks had found a thread. I pulled it carefully. I routed what I found to a contact at the Fifth Circuit's Judicial Conduct Office and to a second journalist, this one at the Texas Tribune, a reporter who had been building a piece on prosecutorial interference for 8 months and was looking for a specific example to bring it into focus. The formal complaint was filed 40 days after Zach came home from the hospital. Judge Prescott recused himself from 3 pending cases 2 weeks later. His son Wade quietly transferred to a law school in New England. Beckett Hartley took longer. He was closer to his father's protection, and his father was a more sophisticated operator. Senator Hartley had survived 2 campaigns and 14 years of Washington, which means he had developed a very particular skill set around managing what the public knew about him and his family. What Senator Hartley had not accounted for was Priya Anand's lawyer. I did not orchestrate what happened next. I want that to be clear. What I did was make a phone call to Priya Anand's attorney, a woman named Christine Okafor, who had been building her own case independently. I told her what I had. I told her I would not testify, could not testify, would not be officially connected to anything. I told her the documentation was solid and she could verify every piece independently. I told her she didn't need me. She had everything she needed. I want to say there was a dramatic moment. A scene. Something worth the word climax. There wasn't. It was quieter than that. The way things that actually work tend to be quieter than the movies. Christine Okafor filed a civil suit against Beckett Hartley 4 months after the night Zach was beaten in that parking lot. The suit included documentation that had been independently verified by 3 sources, none of which could be traced to me. Senator Hartley's office issued a statement saying the senator was deeply troubled and that his son would cooperate fully, which is the statement issued by people who have been told by their lawyers that the documentation is too solid to fight directly. Beckett Hartley accepted a plea arrangement in a separate criminal proceeding 11 months later. His father did not seek a third term. I was sitting in Zach's dorm room when Christine Okafor's office sent the notification. We had ordered pizza from a place on Greenbrier that Zach liked. He was showing me something on his laptop, a project his team was building for a robotics competition, something with articulated joints that I didn't fully follow. He looked good. The bruising had been gone for months. The scar along his jaw was faint now, the kind you notice when the light hits a certain way, and then you stop noticing. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. He looked at it. He looked at me. "Dad," he said. "I know." He looked at the screen for another moment. Then he set the phone down, face down on the desk, and picked up a slice of pizza. "You want to see how this arm mechanism works?" he said. I did. I watched him walk me through it for 20 minutes. The articulated joints and the sensor array and the problem they were trying to solve with the grip response. I understood maybe a third of it. It was the best 20 minutes I'd had in a year. There are things I cannot give him back. The night in that parking lot. The weeks of recovery. The particular way a person changes after they've been hurt badly by people who believed they were untouchable. The way Zach got quieter for a while, more careful. The way he looked around rooms before he entered them. That stays. That's the part that doesn't fully heal. And if anyone tells you different, they're selling you something. What I can tell you is this. Priya Anand graduated from Rice the following spring. I know because Hendricks told me, and because Zach told me separately, which means they knew each other in some way I didn't ask about. She went to Columbia for a graduate program in public policy. I like to think that means something about who she is. Zach made Dean's List his junior year. His robotics team placed second in a national competition in March. He still calls me every Sunday. I'm not a good man in the way that word usually gets used. I made a set of choices over the course of 11 months that I cannot fully defend in any court or in any honest conversation, and I've made peace with that in the way that men who've made irreversible choices have to make peace with things, not by pretending they were clean, but by deciding they were necessary and accepting the weight of that distinction. What I know is that 3 men who believed they were protected by money and name and the institutional goodwill of powerful fathers found out, in ways specific to each of them, that protection is not the same as invincibility. What I know is that a young woman got her day in court, imperfect and delayed and hard-won as it was. What I know is that my son called me last Sunday from his apartment near campus, and he sounded like himself, that specific version of himself, the one who still finds things worth getting excited about, who still tells a story all the way to the end, who still laughs at his own jokes before he finishes them. He said, "Hey, Dad, you doing okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm doing okay." I meant it. Before you go, if you've ever watched a system close ranks around the people it was built to protect, leave a comment below. I read every one. And if you want to hear what happened when a military dad found out the investigation had been buried before it even started, that story is up next. Don't go anywhere. I've thought a lot about what actually happened in that kitchen the night I poured 2 fingers of bourbon and didn't drink it. A lot of people want to call what I did justice. Some would call it something darker. I've stopped arguing about the label. What I know is that the sequence of events that followed was not random, and it was not luck. Beckett Hartley, Wade Prescott, Colt Drennan, 3 men who had spent their entire lives learning one lesson, that the consequences other people face simply did not apply to them. Their fathers had built walls, legal, financial, institutional, and those walls had held so many times before that the sons stopped believing the walls could ever come down. That kind of certainty changes a person. Not for the better. What it actually does is make you careless. And carelessness over time leaves a trail. I did not beat the system. I want to be honest about that. I used the system's own weight against it, the parts of it that still worked, the journalists who still believed the story mattered, the attorneys who still took cases they weren't guaranteed to win, the investigators who still wrote things down, None of that happens if Priya Anand doesn't hold on. None of it happens if Christine Okafor doesn't answer the phone. I was one piece of something larger, and the men who underestimated that were men who had gotten so used to controlling every piece on the board that they forgot other people were also playing. There's a thing that happens when you spend years building something. A company, a life, a version of yourself that functions in the world. And then something comes along that threatens to unmake the part of it that actually matters. You find out very quickly what your skills are actually for. Not the skills you put on a resume. The ones that are in you at 3 in the morning when you're sitting in a hospital chair watching a monitor blink. I spent a long time after I left the army trying to become someone who didn't need those older skills anymore. I think that was the right instinct. I also think I was wrong about what not needing them meant. It didn't mean erasing them. It meant choosing very carefully what they were in service of. Zach called me Sunday. He always calls on Sunday. He told me his robotics team qualified for nationals. He told me he's thinking about a graduate program. He told me at the end of the call, almost as an aside, that he ran into Priya near campus and she looked good, and he sounded like a person reporting good news about someone whose good news genuinely mattered to him. That's the part that doesn't make it into the stories about men like me. The quiet part. The Sunday call. The way a person who got hurt badly can, over enough time and with enough support and with enough of the right things going right, start to sound like themselves again. The men who made that harder than it had to be are living with what they chose. Not because of fate, not because of anything beyond the fact that choices accumulate and the structure you build on top of them eventually either holds or it doesn't. Theirs didn't. That's not cosmic. That's just arithmetic. I'm not asking anyone to do what I did. I'm not holding it up as a model. I'm telling you what happened and letting you decide what it means. What I believe, the thing I've come to after a year of carrying this, is that integrity is not the absence of hard choices. It's making the hard choices with your eyes open and your reasons clear, and then living inside the outcome without pretending it cost less than it did. It cost something. I know what it cost. I'd make the same call again.